Hey guys, welcome to lesson 11. I'm going to pre-warn you, this lesson will be the most important lesson we have done up until this point. So if you are not caught up through lesson 11, you need to close this video, get yourself caught up, and then come back to lesson 11. Because this is going to be kind of where we really start to get into the programming. So if you look at this code right here in your book, what we're doing is we're going to set this exact program up. So we're going to say int j is equal to 0 and int sum is equal to 0. So we're setting them equal to 0 in the very beginning. Then what we're going to do is we're going to run it through a for loop. So we're going to set j equal to 3, semicolon. We're going to do this code until j becomes greater than 79. And then we're going to increase j. So basically this is going to run as j equal to 3. J is less than 79, so it's going to run. Then we're going to increase j. J is equal to 4 now. And then we're calculating all of this into a sum. So the reason why I showed you that excellent clip from a very excellent show is to kind of show you the trouble you can get into now that we're into loops. So with loops, you can get yourself stuck in an infinite loop. So we need to be very careful about how we operate our loops. All right, so go ahead and go into Eclipse and make a new Java project, call it lesson 11. New class, we're going to call it lesson 11. In your comment block, set up your brackets, and we're going to start writing for that code. So first we're going to set sum equal to 0. The sum is going to be our answer. It's going to be the thing that we're always looking at in this program. Next, let's set up our for loop. So this is going to be our skeleton for our for loop. So just like before, just like always, after our method is called, we put an open, close bracket, just like in the if statement, just like in the switch, and now for the for. All right, so we're going to come up into our for loop. So we are going to set our first variable. So we're going to come into our open close parentheses right after the for. And unlike the if statement, which just had one conditional, the for loop is going to have 3 separate pieces. So the first piece is going to be setting whatever variable we're using. The most common that you're going to see are j or I. So what we're going to do is we're going to do int j equals 3. We're going to set it right there. So this first part of the statement tells us where we begin. So put a semicolon after it. The next part of our for conditional statement is going to tell us where we end. So we're going to end whenever j goes above 79. So j less than or equal to 79. So that is saying that as long as j is 79 or less, whatever is in this for loop is going to execute. So put another semicolon after that. So the last part is going to be our increment. So basically telling us what's going to happen to j in this line. So every time j increases, so we're going to put in j plus plus. So now what we're saying is that this loop is going to execute as long as j is less than or equal to 79. And every time it goes through, j is going to increase by 1. So it runs through, j is 3, it adds on, so now j is 4, it's going to do it again, j is 5, j is 6. So it's going to do this loop until it reaches 80, and then it's going to escape. I know that seems kind of confusing, but this is what we call in the programming language, it's called iterations. So you will get the hang of it. I promise you, you will get the hang of it. Right now, it might just seem a little muddied, but once you see it in action, it'll make a lot more sense. Okay, so let's go inside of our loop. We're going to say sum equals sum plus j. So what we're saying now, every time sum is going to increase by j, and it's going to become the new sum. So when we come through the first time, sum is going to be 0 plus 3, so it's going to be 3. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come back through. So then now j is 4. The old sum was 3 plus 4, so sum is now going to be 7. So it starts to make sense when you kind of look at it that way, and it's going to keep doing this loop until j is 79. So what we need to do now is we need to see what our answer is. And I'm sure you all recall from way back, system.out.println, make sure that when you do this, you are outside of the for loop. Otherwise, you're going to get it to print 76 lines, which is unnecessary. So we are going to system.out.print, and I want to see what sum is. All right, and then go ahead and run your code, and it was 3,157. So now we're getting to a point where it makes a little bit more sense. Before, we could have printed our name, we could have added a couple things, we could have calculated stuff for the sphere fairly easily. But now we're starting to get into things where it does make more sense to actually use a computer. Because who wants to do this 76 times in a row when you can just use a little bit of logic to make the computer do all of your work for you? Alright, so 3,157 is what you would get if you add 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 all the way up to 79. So now, you know what? Morbid curiosity's gotten a hold of me. I am going to cut, so Control X, and I'm going to paste this into my for loop. We're going to look at it the whole way running. So now it's going to print 76 times, just like I warned you it would. So let's go back, 3, 7, 12, right? So 3 plus 4 is 7, 7 plus 5 is 12, 12 plus 6 is 18, 18 plus 7 is 25. So our math is going correctly all the way to 3157. Take a look inside your for loop. So right here, this is called the initialization expression. So the initialization expression basically tells us where we start our loop. The control expression, the next part of our for loop, tells you how long this loop operates. Basically, it goes back and forth between the initialization and the control as long as the control is accurate. So it's going back and back and back. So now, what if we had said as long as j greater than 0? If we had said j greater than 0, it would have kept going forever and ever and ever. Because 3 is greater than 0, we're increasing j. So it would have created an infinite loop. So you need to be cautious of where you set your initialization expression and your control expression. That being said, you are going to 100% at some point, either during this class or in a next level computer science class in college, you're going to create an endless loop. I would put my money on it. That's probably going to happen in this class. So just so you know, it's going to happen to you. And just be ready for it. This last part is called the step expression. So I'm going to come over here and make a remark next to it just to keep it straight so you have it written down somewhere. So the first part is initialization, the second is the control expression, and the last one is the step expression. The most common is to increment by 1, just like we have here, j++. You could even write it as j plus equals 1, but I will tell you, you will be in the minority. The majority of people who program in Java use j++ for this type. You can also have it decrement by 1 also. Alright, so let's test the next part. We're going to get rid of sum. So we're going to delete line 15. We're going to delete that first line where we initialize sum. Instead of putting sum every line, I'm going to put J. I just want to see what J is doing. So let's go ahead and run our program. So it goes through a loop, starts at 3, counts all the way up to 79, and then stops. All right, let's try something else though. Let's try going J minus minus. Is our step. Let's initialize J to be 100. And let's keep decreasing J as long as it is greater than 0. So what we're doing now is we're saying J is equal to 100. As long as J is greater than or equal to 0, this loop is going to operate, and every time we run the loop, J decrements by 1. So let's go ahead and run. So it just counted all the way backwards from 100 all the way to 0. So one thing that I want you to note is that before, when we use like J minus minus, it would decrement right after that line. But in the for loop, what it really does when you use this as your step, it runs your step right after the for loop executes. So if you notice, right here we say J is equal to 100, then we have J minus minus. Before, it would minus minus in time for this J, but it prints 100. So really this J minus minus, it's like putting it at the end of your loop. And honestly, guys, when I first started programming, that was one of the hardest things for me to remember, because I really understood that minus minus J meant it happened that line. J minus minus meant it happened in the next line. But for for loops, it's like putting it right at the end of the loop, right before it repeats. So if you can just remember that part, you will be golden for this part. You will be miles ahead of other people. Sorry, lesson 11's a little bit long, but it's got the second part in the second video. So go ahead, watch the second video first before you go attempting the lesson.